Reflecting on the Moment is a collaborative initiative spearheaded by the Dean of the College in consultation with the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. The new series invites alumni, current undergraduates, faculty, and staff to have honest conversations about the current moment in which we are living in the wake of a global pandemic and systemic police brutality. The aim is to present models of inclusive dialogue, to draw from the rich personal experiences and expertise of our ever-developing and ever-changing community, and to present approaches for community activism and engagement in the name of racial equity and justice. My name is Drew Thompson. I am an assistant professor of historical and Africana studies here at Bard College and director of Africana studies. Today, I have the distinct privilege of speaking with Dariel Vasquez, co-founder and co-director of the mentoring initiative Brothers at Bard and Brothers at and Bard class of 2017. Welcome, Dariel.
Hey, Joe. Real pleasure to be here and talk to you, especially at such a critical moment. Thank you for having me.
Of course. I know you were deeply troubled by the recent deaths within communities of color in the wake of COVID-19 and police brutality. Is there a specific moment from your undergraduate education here at Bard that helps you process the times we are living?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I'm smiling just thinking about it. So the night after watching the George Floyd video, of course, like probably many others, I was tossing and turning and couldn't get to sleep, and jumped up from bed and grabbed Black Skin, White Mask by Frantz Fanon. And I don't go anywhere really without having that book in reach. When I was in my sophomore year at Bard, I took a class called Black Modernisms with Professor Ewan. And that whole year actually was probably when so many things came to head. Like I was questioning a lot of my own preconceived notions of what it meant to be Black, especially growing up first generation in Harlem, went to all Black and Latino schools. And so I came into college with what I thought the box that society had put me into thinking Blackness meant. And here I was trying to grapple with my own identity and trying to be holistically me, right? And I had that kind of internal explosion that Fanon talks about in one of his chapters, especially as I came to confront a lot of my white peers and coming into this society. So a lot of what I witnessed at that time and with Trayvon Martin case and with the rise of Black Lives Matter, came right at the great moment in my academic experience where I can delve through these and at a very personal level, which I think is really my main point at a time like this. For those of us who can use the academy, and even those who maybe going to grab a book isn't your way of doing it, one way or another, find ways to get in touch with your humanity at a time like this, especially as a Black person in this country. Because we're constantly witnessing the most inhumane things happen to Black bodies. And for me, Fanon, my own academic experience, the liberal arts was a way for me to kind of keep in touch with my humanity and redefine what it means to be me, right, for myself. And that's kind of why I'm so drawn to Fanon's work, and especially in moments like this, why I'm reminded of who I am and why I do what I do, which is a great segue to the question I actually have for you, which is, what do you think is the role of the academy at a time like this, especially in conversations about police brutality and racism in America?
Yeah, thank you, Dariel. I think institutions of higher education have three roles. First, they must acknowledge that Black students live with the constant fear that they or their loved ones can be stopped by the police or have their race used against them. I think two, Institutions must work to explain why in this historical moment, after generations of systematic police brutality and police violence, people are reacting to the killings of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Tony McDade. And when addressing the pervasiveness of white supremacy and privilege, Toni Morrison remarked, if you can be tall because someone else is on your knees, then you have a serious problem. And I think this gets to my third point. Institutions must equip students to understand the inner workings of racism in order to enact effective change. And I'm wondering here if maybe, Dariel, you can talk a little bit about what types of conversations you are having with your own leadership, as well as members at Brothers at Bard, on issues related to racial inequity, as well as racial justice.
Yeah, this is something I've actually been grappling with for the past week as well. There's to use some of the language that's become really prevalent and popular due to COVID. It's given us, it's given me a bit of language to describe a bit of the role that mentors, people, nonprofit leaders, educators play for students and for young people. In a lot of ways, we are a type of first responders to the traumas that our young people are dealing with and trying to sift through for themselves at this moment. I actually got sent the video before I even knew it had happened about George Floyd by a mentee of mine. Right, so before I can even process this for myself, right, I have to be there for somebody that looks like me, who's younger than me, and help him sift through it and work, right? And there's so many other educators and mentors and people who do this type of work have to be kind of on the front lines, especially when, our communities have been so deprived of, enough Black psychiatrists and counselors, right? And so we kind of find ourselves filling in part of that role. So many of the boys we work with themselves, and myself included, have experienced so much negative interactions with police, with authority, have encountered racism and microaggressions in one way or another. And so to see these things, especially on social media for our young people, it can be incredibly triggering for them. And so we're constantly at the front lines. I think what me and the leadership over at Brothers At have been talking about is, how do we address these traumas? How do we work through it ourselves? And how do we continue to push the conversation forward in a productive way for our guys? And making sure that the work that we do continues to be healing centered, right? And that we're kind of focusing on making sure that there's enough healing, social, emotionally, and mentally for our guys at times like this. But it can be, obviously, I'm describing a heavy burden, right, that a lot of us have to carry, especially in this line of work, for one reason or another. My question to you, Drew, is how do you balance, as a Black educator, trying to support your students with not carrying the heavy burden of the institution at moments like this?
Yeah. Dariel, your reading of Fanon reminds me about how much violence is carried at the level of the skin, that often, as we know in this moment, many of us lack the words to kind of process what we are constantly witnessing. And I was struck by your point just now, in which you make the idea, you present the point that you are confronting violence just as you're helping someone process that violence. And to answer your question, oftentimes I operate from a place of inadequacy and a sense of feeling out of place. I feel what I do sometimes is professionally never enough, and certainly never good enough. And this feeling is triggered when someone mistakes me for a student rather than a professor. And it extends from the constant surveillance and critique that Black people experience in the United States. There are few Black people in higher education. And those who are privileged to have overcome the challenges that are presented to enter the academy then are rewarded by the task of teaching this ambiguous thing called the Black experience. And they also are standing in for diversity. So I think my role as a professor is to equip my students with critical thinking, writing, and speaking skills that allow them to recognize their brilliance while warding off any notions of inadequacy. And you know I love my two-part question. So first, could you talk a little bit about strategies for mentorship that we could engage in while in quarantine? And second, how are you encouraging members of Brothers at Bard to seize the moment and get involved politically?
That's great. So to answer the first part, I think the best way to answer it is to lean into a bit about the way we do our work. All right, we use our methodology. We lean heavily into our methodology. We have an R space methodology that focuses on creating or holding space for these types of conversations for young Black men to be vulnerable, to be sensitive, to be open. Right. One of the pillars of it, like I mentioned earlier, is that it's healing centered. That it's a space for us to kind of to unlearn a lot of toxic behavior and kind of be open enough to share our shared lived experiences with one another, especially at times like this, right? And I would encourage people to find ways to hold space and create space for our young people at a time like this, right? Like it may not need to be with exactly the same methodology that we use, that we coined, but your own tactic or way of doing it. How do you hold space? How do you have these conversations and provide these outlets in a way where people can channel positively, right? Positively channel their traumas or what challenges, triggers that they're having at this moment. And you know, the second part to that is, you know, I kind of leaned into it a little bit earlier, but find what your form of activism is, right? Like everyone's form of activism is different, right? I tell the guys that all the time. Like for us, it just happens to be, you know, implementing our methodology, creating spaces, working, mentoring, you know, social emotional help and healing. For some of my friends who are teachers, they're like, look, my form of activism is in the classroom.
Right.
As one of my friends always reminds me, right? A mentor used to say, like, you know, somebody needs to fund the movement, right? And donate, right? Like other people have different forms and methods to kind of get active. And I'm constantly reminding the folks of that, right? Like there's so many different avenues you could take. And that's what I would really encourage. And more than anything, right? Like, be there for one another, be kind to yourself and be kind to others at times like this, and be mindful of the kind of unique experience that, of course, all Black people are experiencing, but especially young people who might, for the first time, might be trying to grapple with this and don't have any other reference points in other points of their lives that they can kind of refer back to. So. Find your form. Find your way to get active in your way. Find your voice, your avenue, and get to it.
Great. Thank you so much. I mean, it's a powerful reminder that the work of the university is also to teach empathy and to teach how to care not only for oneself, but others in this moment. So thank you, Dariel. Thank you for the opportunity to reflect on this moment with you. And we encourage our viewers to look forward to future installations of this series reflecting the moment. Thank you.